everyone, and welcome back to the Wellzest podcast. I am beyond thrilled for today's episode because I have Lindsey Carnick, who is just a powerhouse with us, and I just can't wait for such a rich conversation. We're already laughing talking about cereal, which is a whole other aside.
We may be stuck. We may be in that lane for the duration.
Yeah, totally. I could talk about crunchy, crispy, clustery cereal for hours because I'm obsessed.
And if we get into what you can then do with cereal, if you're so inclined to make it into other things, right? There's hours worth of material here. Days, weeks.
Hours. Actually, that should be like a whole podcast and a cookbook, like,
True.
in its own right. Anyhow, love it, love it, love it. Lindsey, I want to go through your bio because you've just have such a rich, diverse set of experience. I'm going to go through that so everyone can get to know Lindsey. Lindsey Carnick is the owner and founder of Onward Psychological Services. Well, she's a highly experienced psychotherapist with a rich background in supporting healing journeys for some of the most vulnerable populations. With over 15 years in the field, she has worked with a diverse range of clients, from young males with gang affiliations incarcerated in maximum security juvenile prisons, to nuns, doctors, athletes, execs, military officers, and many, many more individuals. Known for her empathetic yet grounded approach, Lindsey integrates trauma-informed care, cultural sensitivity, and holistic wellness into her practice. Wow, wow, wow. Amazing. Amazing. The work that you've done, what I love is your approach to the work and, how you really, I think that sometimes going into therapy, and you talk about this, I know with story, people are so worried about sharing their story or what it means to them. And you create such a safe space for them, which is incredible. Incredible.
It's a work that's an honor to do, right? It's an honor to be with people. It's a privilege.
Yeah. Amazing. 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 I'm just curious, what were those early experiences that you feel like if you were to reflect on your life, what actually drove you to get into the work that you do?
I guess there's two kind of answers there, which are how I got there and then what kept me there, maybe.
Right.
Even more importantly is, I wasn't planning on being a therapist. I was planning on being a policy analyst and social policy analyst.
Right.
And I really I still believe in macro level change.
Right.
That's the framework which we're all working within, and that matters.
Right.
The upstream, what's going on upstream really matters deeply in terms of people's downstream experience.
Right.
And I was trained as a policy analyst and a therapist at the same time in clinical social work. That's one of the things that can happen, among others. And when I graduated and was sort of getting started, policy analysis did not present itself as a viable opportunity for a newly minted person.
Right.
Go figure, right? Shocking.
Right.
And I found my way into working as a therapist in the Department of Corrections for maximum security prison. And that was a remarkable twist of fate that was, quite frankly, it just happened. It just happened that way. And it seemed like a good learning opportunity, and also the ramifications for understanding macro level policy. That's an incredible incubator to learn what on the ground sort of looks like from the individual level, right? And so that was all very appealing to me for lots of reasons. And it was in that environment that I fell in love with the power of sitting with people and sitting with people in their experience, and also starting to gently be curious about the stories people hold about themselves and where those stories come from, how they're maintained, how they are evolving or devolving over time, and in what directions, and what the consequences are for people of being sort of trapped in those storylines and thinking that those are set in stone. And so I think that for me, it's been an evolution that starts with truly being a person who's deeply interested in people to start with and is very relational, and also a person who's endlessly fascinated by the idea of stories in general. Story is a way that all humans make meaning. right? Out of what's
So
happening
true.
in the world, whether
Right.
that's the stuff falling from the sky or
Right.
what happened over there, what this person did or what I did, or we make meaning through stories, whether it's a micro story, which is, a sentence long, or whether it's a novel. That's all an attempt to make sense out of our experience. And I am
Mm.
so deeply interested in that, and so deeply interested in how that impacts people's lived experience.
Right.
And as it happened that when I got my sort of start in the Department of Corrections, hearing some incredible stories and bearing witness to people struggling to rewrite or re-understand or reinterpret these stories that they were carrying, that's when I was kind of off to the races.
Very, I love what you say about story and how you unpack that, because I feel like a lot of times our story is what defines us, how we interpret our story, how we look at it, what it means to us. Do you feel like people can, I think there could be two things. You feel like people can be dismissive of their story and that becomes toxic? Or do you think that, and do you also see a paradigm where people over-intellectualize their story and it really becomes the weight on their back throughout their life?
All of the above. And I think those things can happen at the same time, which is also endlessly fascinating. I'm really always interested, both for myself and other people, by self-deprecation and by people who can sort of ironically reference something about themselves in this toss-off sort of way. I think the classic example is somebody referring to their role in their family, like, oh, well, I was the golden child, or, oh, I was the black sheep, things like this.
Right.
And they toss it off and they laugh, and then you go, huh.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? You're like, I hear you acknowledging that.
Right.
But are you? Like, do you understand? I'm not going to assume that it had deep ramifications for you, but it seems like it has some sort of ramifications for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting, when we can point to something and say, oh, I sort of see this so clearly, but also we're dismissing it. We don't want to be identified with it, right? There's all sorts of room for interesting things to happen there. And so I think both of the things that you mentioned could absolutely happen concurrently for people.
How do you have someone, and this is such a broad thing to talk about, but rewrite their story? Let's say someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm really stuck in this story that's detrimental to my life. Is there a process by which someone can actually start to rewrite that story? What does that look like? What are some of the practices, that you lead someone through to get to that place?
That can look like different things for different people, and also depending on at what point in the trajectory they are and in what point in sort of a change trajectory they are, and also where that storyline or storylines came from, right? Are those storylines that they've internalized from other people? Are those storylines that they've sort of settled on based on their experience? They've connected the dots. The interesting thing about connect the dots, you remember the little thing on kids' menus, you get your crayon and you have these dots. You and I as adults could sit down with a box of crayons and a connect the dot, and I can make that thing look like anything. I don't care if it's supposed to be a cat, or a clown. I can start connecting dots in ways. I will make you a rocket ship on a double, or a box of kicks, as the case may be, right? So the starting point for most people is simply to interrogate the idea that these things are fixed at all. Not that they are or aren't there. I can make a cat out of that set of dots, or a rocket ship, or a box of kicks, right? The difficulty that most people are having is being stuck in the idea that those dots can only be connected into a cat.
So true.
Right? And once we can sort of maybe soften a little bit towards the idea that, those are a set of dots, and you can connect them in any one of a million ways, or not connect them at all. You don't even have to use them all. Right? It's only the menu that says you have to use all the dots. You do not have to connect all those dots unless you want to. And then the secondary question becomes, I think, is what is it about the way you've connected those dots, or accepted what someone else told you about the way the dots are connected, that is working for you?
Right. Yeah.
Because these things don't maintain themselves for no reason, right?
Exactly.
And even when people are, as I call it, comfortably uncomfortable, or uncomfortably comfortable, depending on your orientation, it's working. Something about it is doing something, even
Exactly.
if there are also consequences that are not enjoyable or desirable or wanted.
Right.
So A is recognizing that none of these things are fixed, that it's
Right.
all a construct to begin with, right?
Right.
And once we recognize that, then everything is possible.
Yes.
And then it becomes a matter of saying, okay, well, what is it about having drawn a cat by connecting those dots that is doing something for you that you're unwilling to take your eraser,
Right.
undo the cat and connect those dots in some other way.
Right.
And there's all sorts of possible answers to that. Those are the two starting places, though, where people start to find tremendous amounts of freedom. And I think after that, the work becomes much less difficult in a way. That those are the two main barriers for most people.
I'm so curious. At what point does someone come to you? And I'm sure you've seen so many different types of situations, people coming to you from, different backgrounds, life stages, crises, or not even in crisis, just, hey, I'm on a journey. But what do you see the most? And what does that conversation with you typically start with?
People reach out at a tremendously variable
only imagine.
spectrum of points in life, right? Or sort of tipping points or precipitating events. What's happened that somebody goes, gosh, maybe I should talk to somebody. And it's interesting because there are as many people who sort of say, I've been thinking about this for years. And now I feel nothing particularly recent or pressing or dramatic has happened. Or that's what they say. And yet I'm willing to, or interested at this point in moving forward. And and then some people obviously reach out because something has happened. Some event has sort of pushed the tipping point and they go, okay, I need to do this. I want to do this. I want some kind of change.
Right.
What I think is interesting is when folks say nothing's really going on, I've just been thinking about this for years. I think that's true for many people. And also, I believe that they're not aware that internally they've hit some point that is almost as significant as something happening in the external world.
Totally. Absolutely.
Right? Otherwise, they would still be doing the same thing and they would still be thinking about it, right? Something has to push people, whether it's an inch or a mile, to take the next step in whatever it is they're thinking about doing or have been thinking about for years. So people sort of reach out under all sorts of different conditions. And it's often the case that folks have an example of something that troubles them. So they'll say, this thing happened in my life and I'm having a hard time dealing with it. And I want to deal with this thing, right? And then when they start the work, it becomes fairly noticeable that the thing is simply representative of a much bigger thing that is much more generalized. And this is one little example, but really there have been 56 of these examples over time, or this is not the first time they've experienced this, right? And there's a bigger set of conditions or concerns or lack of clarity that creates the conditions for this example of the thing to occur again and again and again, which I think is what's most rewarding to people about good therapy or about good, robust work, is that hopefully it helps you go from the very specific to the very generalizable, right? So that you can say, oh, now I have a set of tools to move forward, not just on this one little thing that I sort of sought out help for around this experience, but now I have this set of very broad tools that I can take with me and apply to a much bigger set of conditions. Even if this little thing never happens again, that's okay, because what I've learned isn't specific to that little thing that I came in, or medium thing, or big thing, but whatever it was a limited, discrete thing that I initially sought some help for. And I think that's very rewarding for people. It's very rewarding for me.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I think there's such power in that. I'm going to call it the bubbling. Sometimes you have like this bubbling where you're like everything's okay. And I've had this experience where I'm like, everything's okay, but something is off. And, having a place and a space to be able to go and talk about that and unpack what that means. I feel like a lot of times therapy, at least the way that, maybe this is just the way that I was, brought up, it was like you go to therapy when you're sad or things are bad only. And I think it's been really interesting, Lisa. I feel like over the last few years, you start to see more of that. People saying like, hey, there's something, I just need to unpack this, or I need that advocate. And therapy is a great conduit or a good place for me to go and unpack that. I'm just curious, do you feel like we're in and I had a debate, this is coming from a dinner debate, and I love a good lively dinner debate, and someone threw out this, they're like, I feel like we're in a epidemic of real emotion. Someone was saying they were like, yeah, it feels like everything's performative on social media. So if you actually have any real emotions, even if they're emotions that are very conflicting, or as we're talking about that kind of bubbling feeling, you're groomed to push them down because that's not Instagram pretty, or no one wants to hear about that on TikTok. Do you feel like we're in an epidemic of real emotions and social media may be driving us to suppress some of our real emotions?
Yes. Although I'm not sure, I'm thinking, I had not heard of that expression. And so I'm thinking about this.
Yeah.
Yes. And if there's one thing I see, it's that not so much that folks, and I'm not particularly social media savvy, so I may also not be the right person to be weighing in.
Don't worry,
what I do see a ton of is not so much folks seeming to feel pressured to present in a certain way.
Right.
But although maybe we're kind of saying the same thing, or maybe this is analogous, certainly folks feeling very self-conscious that they're not having the right emotional experience at any given time.
Interesting.
That they're not, it's sort of, I think, is epitomized by the expression first world problem, where somebody will tell you that something's bothering them and then they'll go, I know it's a first world problem. I know. Like they have to put this disclaimer out there that they don't think their problem is real, and they're very, very aware that other people have it worse than them. And they're not trying to claim some sort of space that they're not entitled to because they have a roof over their heads, and please don't think I'm obtuse.
Exactly.
And you go, whoa, it's okay. Right? Like having a roof over your head does not inoculate you from the human experience. Right? There's no inoculation. There's no amount of affluence or success or status or any of these things that inoculates anyone from the human experience.
Exactly.
And so I certainly think that, and I'm not sure it's people on social media just doing the highlight reel either, because there's certainly a lot of the low light reel on social media, which is a different kind of extreme.
Totally.
Right?
Exactly.
And I think that is as hard on other people as the highlight reel, because it suggests to them that they should pipe down about whatever's bothering them because it's not real enough, right? It's not bad enough, as if there was a contest here and you got to make some kind of grade of awfulness in order to have it be legit or real, which of course is ridiculous, Empathy, having empathy for other people, there's an unlimited amount of empathy, right?
So
and
true.
So it really bums me out when I experience people who seem to think by being genuine about what's troubling them, they're taking away empathy from somebody else who has it worse. No, you're not. This is not how empathy works, right?
Totally.
Absolutely. We can absolutely empathize with you that XYZ is going on in your life, even if you have a roof over your head and all these other things that you think should make it better for you, and somehow you feel obligated to say, don't worry, I know it's not as bad as the next person, or whoever this imagined comparison is. Or maybe that imagined comparison is not imagined. Maybe it's, the reel you saw on social that was describing somebody's horrific circumstances. And yes, your material conditions are much different and better than that. And also, your suffering is real too. It's not made less real by the fact that it's not as bad or worse than that person. And so to me, if there's a real epidemic of sort of feelings confusion that's induced by social media, it's this idea that people feel self-conscious that their human experience isn't bad enough to make some kind of litmus test to deserve empathy. And I find
Right.
that absolutely heartbreaking.
It's so true. And I have to say, guilty as charged. Now we're having this conversation. I think about, sometimes I'll be like, something will happen with my business, or, hey, this relationship is not really going as planned. And I'm sad, but I definitely do the first world problems disclaimer. I'm like, oh, I know these are first world problems, or, hey, my flight got canceled. They lost my bags. I'm off to a trip, and I'm kind of like, I'm peeved about it. I'll do the first world problems disclaimer, because I'm like, I feel bad complaining about this, or something, someone's sick and I'm really upset about it. I'm like, oh, I know it's not as bad as X. I'm curious, how do we honor sadness? And I hear this happening all the time, all the time. People be like, yeah, first world, I love that you so astutely pointed that out. First world problems this, first world problems that, and people are really sad about things in their life. How do you honor sad? Like, what are ways that you can give people space for that sadness, and really allow them to talk through it in a way that is of integrity, and, kind of honors what they're going through?
Mm-hmm. To me, the first part of that is helping people understand that empathy is unlimited, that they're not taking away something from somebody else by sitting with their sadness, right? And by honoring and acknowledging their own sadness. I mean, that has to be the start of it, is sort of self-validating that you too are worthy of empathy, and that this hurts you. And that's enough. That's enough. It's self-validating. It doesn't have to be co-signed by 40 other people to say this hits some metric of bad enough to be deserving of, note or empathy or something like this.
Right.
So I think starting with the idea that empathy for self and others is unlimited, and that by you feeling your feelings, you're not taking away from someone else. You're not harming them, right? I mean, and I think that's also translates into kind of a concrete metric that may sound a little wacky, but you can ask yourself, well, look, if I sit in my feelings about this, is it taking away from somebody else?
Interesting. Right.
And usually, like 99.9% of the time, the answer is no. Right?
Right.
Now, look, let's take an extreme example that probably would never occur in nature, but let's go for it because extreme examples are helpful.
Yes.
If someone needs your help because something has happened in their life, and you are not helping them because you are sitting on your couch, sort of wallowing about something, then maybe it's a different story. Yeah. Then maybe that's a different story, right? But experiencing and acknowledging sadness for yourself isn't taking away something from somebody else. This is not a zero-sum game issue, right? Yeah, exactly. And the beautiful thing I think about empathy and just the universality of the human experience is, look, if something's going on in your life, right? If something happens, knock on wood, God forbid, and I'm sitting on my couch feeling, wallowing in whatever I'm wallowing on about my life, I can keep feeling my feelings and come help you. I don't have to give one up for the other.
It's so true.
It's not like I got to pull it together.
Yeah, exactly. And some people think that, right?
I think so too. So too. And it's just not true, right? In fact, it's really more honest and genuine and empathetic if I go, oh, wow, I can really, in some ways, relate to that right now because I'm super sad and I'm not in a great place. And you know what would be amazing is if I can take my sad self over and help Teju right now with her sad self, because we're both sad, as opposed to being like, no, I got my own sad stuff right now. You got to have your own sad stuff. Right. Yeah. Why? Exactly. I don't think so. And perhaps many people feel a sense of pressure to pull it together and not impose their sadness on the other person who's got it worse, whatever that means. We don't know what that means, right?
Right. Totally.
I don't think if we reverse the scenario, people think about those things. Right?
So true. Yeah.
I
feel like
don't.
got it where you're like, oh, I don't want to bother this person because they're X, Y, and Z, is some of the script that I've heard over and over and over again from people, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that that's a shame.
I do too. And I think we can be a little more granular and nuanced about these things. I mean, look, if someone's at their relative's deathbed, don't ask them to help you move.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, right? That's not rocket science.
Yeah, exactly. Not the time. Not the time.
Right, right. We can see those things.
You can
They're
see those
pretty
things. Yeah.
obvious, right?
Yeah,
I think most of
exactly.
those situations are pretty obvious.
Agree.
And everything short of that, I think it's okay to go like, hey, not only is it okay, it's completely predictable given the nature of the human experience that you and I might be having a hard time at the same time.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's a problem.
I agree. I do want to just switch gears and actually talk a little bit about your early work. So you worked, you know, in prison with juvenile young males. I'm just so curious. I can't even imagine the stories, the conversations, some of the trauma that you witnessed and heard and experienced. Walk me through some of the misconceptions maybe that people might have about, you know, men who are in jail, some of the things you learned from working with, you know, the individuals that you worked with.
One of the things that to this day stands out to me the most, and I'm going to say this carefully and then with a bunch of preamble and postamble.
Right.
Is that they were children.
Yeah.
Now, they were children, some of whom had done horribly violent adult things.
Right.
Behaviorally, right? They were capable of inflicting tremendous damage on people and property, and I am not soft selling that one iota.
Right.
And but what really stood out to me again and again and again was how much when they weren't doing those things, they were children.
Yeah. Wow.
It's really troubling.
Wow.
And I am not a soft on crime person, not at all. And also, it certainly gives you pause for thought, right? About what happens when children are in situations where they can access adult means to do adult things, for starters, right? And also when they're in situations where developmentally they're children, but in terms of their reality, they're being forced to act like adults. Because there aren't enough adults around, or because situationally, whatever, there's an infinite number of scenarios that create that, right? And one of the things that really struck me again and again and again, and this has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. I mean, these kids were guilty of what they were guilty of. That's not in question. They did it, all of it. What struck me again and again was that despite all of that, they were still kids.
Yeah, I can't.
And they, I'm repeating myself because it just seems, it's the thing that I can't get over. So it repeats in my head, right? Like they were children who were not able to be children, and who found themselves in these situations where they were able to have child developmental level that they were at, but instead of wielding blocks, they are wielding lethal weapons. And their prefrontal cortexes and the other parts of their brains that are developmentally still children, that's what you got. This is why we don't let children have stoves or heavy machinery or cars or any of the other things we don't let children have. Right. And it was really remarkable and heartbreaking and breathtaking to me, the degree to which, despite the tremendous violence and aggression that were in their histories and sometimes in their presence, like literally still doing it in prison. How when they weren't doing that, they were just like kids. I mean, they were kids.
Just who wanting to play, curious,
draw.
Exactly.
Joke around, you know. And that will really tear your brain in half.
I can't
really
even
tear your brain in half.
I always say that. I always use that phrase actually, like whenever I see someone, people, and as you're saying, if someone did something wrong, they did something wrong. I'm not here to, but I'm always like, that's someone's child. And that always bothers me. When I think about it, I think about that child being brought into this world, the hopes and dreams that, may have been had for them. And, the circumstance that they end up in, and the generational trauma, honestly, from that. I'm actually curious on, how generational trauma impacts us. And do people recognize the patterns of generational trauma and how those scripts are running their lives? Or is it only after work and therapy that, sometimes people are able to unpack that?
Yes to all the things.
I love yes to all the things.
And also,
Yeah.
I want to be careful to not, I want to be mindful that individuals also have a tremendous amount of agency, right? And individuals make remarkable decisions in the face of tremendous adversity and tremendous set conditions, right?
Right.
And in some ways, I think we were talking about incarcerated youth.
Right.
One of the remarkable things about some of what those kids have been through in the lives they've lived is they're tremendously resourceful. You kind of look at these histories and you go, holy cow, if you could turn these forces on something other than drugs, this would be unbelievable.
Totally.
You would rule the world.
Right.
Right.
Unbelievable.
And so I want to be mindful that also people and kids are tremendously resilient and are not necessarily sort of destined or controlled by what has come before, right? And there are individuals who are able to, for one reason or another, especially youth, who are able to connect with one thing that sort of gets them going on a different track despite all odds, right? Maybe it's an adult, maybe it's an activity, it's a something that is enough to kind of nudge them off the train track of intergenerational trauma and sort of get them going in a different direction. And I want to acknowledge that happens, right? And that there are tremendous people out there who are doing tremendous service to a lot of youth with intergenerational trauma and really remarkable work. I think it's tricky for youth sometimes, and I work with adults now in my career. I work with adult individuals and couples, but it's a fine line to talk to people, and this is true of anybody, adults or kids, about what they're doing in their lives and sort of pay homage to the fact that they are independent agents, right? And also bring up the possibility that there are some forces in motion that have impacted their trajectory, right? Without taking their agency away or without taking their independence and autonomy away, right? Because we could say perhaps a simplistic but useful example would be like any of the young men that I worked with all knew that they were breaking the law when they broke the law, right? Like that wasn't a mystery.
Exactly.
So nobody likes being told that they're sort of like a puppet, but whether that's by virtue of history or family or, we all have a sense of agency about our lives and our trajectories, or many of us do, right? And we like to, I don't want to just say we like to believe that we're the masters of our own destiny, but it is often true that we are in many ways making decisions. Yes, that's illegal. No, that is not. That's a pretty clear-cut decision, right? And so in offering up ideas about how other forces perhaps collude to narrow the range of options, right? Or to create a little bit more of a funnel in one direction than another. I think also giving that person credit for their autonomy and their choices within whatever that funnel is really important. Because this is certainly true for me, when people believe that they have no agency, then they have no reason to try doing something differently at all.
So true.
Right?
100%. Yeah.
So if the storyline goes from well, you're irresponsible and, you did all these things and blah, 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 blah. To, oh, it's not your fault. You're a dupe of circumstance. That's actually not really helpful to people in most cases, right? Now, there are certainly useful applications of being able to point to how some things came into being and not others, right? And also, I think being able to acknowledge that and acknowledge the person's autonomy in the world gives them a basis to say, then if I have autonomy, then I can do something differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if it's just conditions and intergenerational trauma, then you have no choice. Then that's not helpful either. And it's not true, right? It can help to explain certain experiences, certain ways in which those funnels perhaps are formed and in which slight direction, but it can't be the answer to how things are the way they are for any of us, because that takes away our agency to do something differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And when you take away your agency, I just feel like you crumble. Your self-identity, I feel like, is compromised, and
yes, and you feel like you have no choice in identity at all.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so curious. I mean, just given all that you've seen, the stories that you've heard, the people that have, walked through your door, how do you actually hold space for others' healing while trying to maintain your very own wellness, your very own, sanctity and agency and peace of mind and all of that, just the heaviness sometimes. Also the levity, I'm sure that people come to you with joy and, progress and things that are really cool. But, when it's tough, how do you maintain your own wellness?
It's interesting you said something about when people come with the heavy things, right?
Yeah.
And I see part of the joy of my work and the honor really is to sit with people in that space and create room for the and.
I love that.
There's always an and.
There's always an and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so part of it is it is therapeutic for people in general somebody who's splashing around in the water having fallen out of a raft doesn't want you to jump out of the raft. Somebody's got to stay in the raft.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to toss the life preserver. Somebody's got to row. Somebody's got to stay in the raft. You have a better chance of rescuing a person in the water if you stay in the raft. If you jump in and they do this to you and you both go down, then it's curtains. It's a wrap. Exactly. Day is over. Right? So I think part of what's therapeutic for people is being able to hold whatever is happening for them and also hold that that's not the only thing that's happening.
Right.
And that's always true for all of us.
Right.
Right. And it's about widening the aperture, right? When we're looking through the paper towel roll and things.
Yes. This is it.
Yes. So my job in some ways is to widen the aperture, right? And that's my job for myself too, is to widen the aperture at all times and to check myself and see if I'm looking down a paper towel tube or if I'm looking through something much wider, traffic cone.
Right.
And that helps tremendously. It is a matter of perspective in that sense. There's always more. There's a famous poem. I was just talking to a friend about this the other night, in which the poem is by William Carlos Williams, and it's about Icarus flying too close to the sun and the wax wings melting. Right?
Yes.
Do you know this poem?
I don't know if I know I know the story though of Icarus.
Okay.
And
I'm not going to try and name the poem because it's in French. The name is French, and I will butcher it badly. So I'm always
butchering French too, so don't worry.
I'll just say it's the William Carlos Williams poem about Icarus.
Okay.
And in it, so Icarus is flown too close to the sun. The wings have melted. He's fallen out of the sky, right? And the poem is actually referencing a painting by Bruegel in which you are seeing Icarus's little feet sticking out of a pond because he's fallen back to earth. And this is like this terrible tragedy, right? That's fantastical. Somebody's fallen from the sky.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
life is going on around him. Like
Yeah.
somebody's farming, somebody's having a picnic, all of
Right.
these things are happening that are going around, right? And so that's an aperture issue. Do you only see this little tiny crazy thing that's happened,
Yeah.
or can you see a little bit of the bigger picture and say, yes, and
Yes.
this
And.
is unbelievably intense and remarkable and difficult and challenging. And also,
Right. And
next
also.
door, there's somebody farming.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unremarkable.
Right. 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 Yeah.
And so that's a skill for all of us, right? To be able to hold these things at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's true for me as a human before I'm a therapist professionally, but I find it to be mutually reinforcing.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to ask one question before we move on to our next section. And this may lead us down a rabbit hole, one that I'm excited about. Couples. Is there one thing that you see couples coming to you about? Is there a catalyst? I want to say, is there one catalyst that you found to be common?
90% of couples who reach out say they have a communication difficulty. That's what they've identified the difficulty as.
Right. Right.
I would say in 80% of cases, that is one of the difficulties. But remember, we were talking about examples versus what the example is referring to. Often, most times, that is an example of a bigger process that is or is not happening. And the bigger process is connection and disconnection. And communication often becomes a feedback loop wherein connection is compromised and then communication goes downhill, and that further compromises the connection, which further compromises the communication, and so on and so forth, right? But the thing that people have a hard time naming is connection, which, okay, it's ephemeral. That is hard to name. It's hard to point to, right? Exactly. You can point to communication difficulties. You can say like, well, when I do this, the other person does this, or when they do this, I do this, and then we end up here. Those are very identifiable experiences, whereas connection is sort of hard to, it's sort of like wishy-washy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
So like all feelings, it's a little bit like a wet bar of soap. You know, the tighter you squeeze it, the faster it shoots out the top of your hand, clocks you in the head, hits the side, ricochets off your toe.
Exactly.
So that is what I hear the most of. And what I see the most of is disconnection. That is usually a revolving door with communication. And often as not is not caused by communication. It's caused by any one of a number of things.
Right. Very interesting. Very interesting. One more thing, actually. I'm just curious, how has your work evolved over the last 15 years? And do you feel like AI is having any impact on the conversations maybe people are coming into you with, or the things that they're saying? Do you find that so far?
I love the first question about how things changed or how has my work evolved. For me, my work evolves on perhaps two lines, two trajectories. One is I'm very dedicated to active learning and active growth as a therapist. So doing therapy doesn't make you better just by doing it. But that's true of anything. Practice makes permanent, not perfect.
Right.
And so on a literal level, my practice is always evolving as I develop certain skills and seek out additional skill building from people who've been in the profession a very, very long time, from, leaders in the field and people doing remarkable research and remarkable, lab research in the sense of how therapy works and what does and doesn't work. And as the gold standards in therapeutic approaches become more and more refined and clearly articulated for different indications, there are wonderful things happening out there. And we're getting better and better at this. The science of it is getting better and better. And it's an art, right? And working to constantly develop the combination of the science and the art is, I think, an absolutely lifelong, career-long goal.
Right.
And that's very important to me. So in a literal level, things are always evolving because I'm always pursuing what's coming down the pipeline, not new modalities, but how do we get better? How do we get better? How do we get better? How do we get better at all of these different things, right? Another trajectory on which I think there's an evolution is simply in our understanding of what's helpful to people. That's not on a modality level, right? A modality is cognitive behavioral therapy, or ACT, or psychodynamic therapy, interpersonal therapy, narrative therapy. These are modalities. That's one trajectory. The other trajectory is a way of being with people that is most helpful to them. And that's about rapport and connection and providing an environment where people can grow and are challenged enough, but not too much. And it feels manageable and accessible, and it's growth oriented, and it should be a little uncomfortable, right? And is moving forward. So there's an experiential component that is always evolving. And I value that. I value that tremendously. I think, having what they call a beginner's mind, right? No matter how experienced you are at something, and being open to new information about what's helpful and under which conditions that's helpful and to whom that's going to be the most helpful, and then knowing where to apply those things. I have been saying for a very long time, and I stand by this, that the most helpful therapy in the world, whatever that is, if there is one, if they narrowed it down to one therapy and this was it, right? And for a while that was cognitive behavioral therapy, quite frankly, right? It was like, I mean, it still is the gold standard, right? If it's not accessible to you, it's not the best therapy for you.
Agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
That's the end, right?
Exactly.
It's like the old joke. The guy goes in the doctor and says, "Hey doc, I'm going to start exercising. Which exercise is the best? Is it swimming? Is it weightlifting? Is it running? Is it CrossFit? Is it tennis?" And the doc looks at whichever one you'll do. Is the best exercise for you. That's the one that's the best. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly there are certain modalities that are clinically indicated and empirically validated for certain conditions and certain presentations. That aside, right? People are open to what they're open to, and that's not always everything, right? And learning how to really be granular and aware and conscientious of what is working for people and what is accessible to them at this moment in time. Not what the ideal situation would be, right?
Exactly. Yes. And it shifts,
It does. Certainly in my own life, I can think of 1,000 different examples of things, therapy included, in which I've been open to some things at some times and not others. And again, the best exercise in the world isn't the best for you if you won't do it. That's no exercise. It's getting you nowhere. Right. So letting people lead with where they're at.
And do you see any AI having any impact on how people are coming into your office? I think about I grew up WebMD or encyclopedias back in the day. And now it's crazy the amount of information and research people have, chat GPT. Are people self-diagnosing? Do you feel like more because of AI? They're coming in no,
not more, the same.
Okay. It's the same.
And differently. Now, instead of saying I went and bought myself a DSM and self-diagnosed, or I was talking to a friend and they diagnosed me. Now people say I was talking to ChatGPT or this, that, or the other, and this is what I've come up with. So people have always done that. It's their reference point is a little different.
It's different. Right.
It's the same, absolutely the same numbers and process. I do think it's interesting. There's been this big push to limit direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. That's been forever, right? Because the idea is that it's unwise and unhelpful and unhealthy to give non-medical people this sort of information so they can march in their doctor's offices and go, "I want blah, blah, blah."
Right. Exactly.
And the doc's like, if I thought you needed that, I would offer that. But and the person's like, "No." Right. Which I think is an interesting debate. I am I don't want to say encouraging, but very open to people coming in and saying, and this happens quite frequently, and I think this is a little bit related to the accessibility of information, whether that's through AI or otherwise, people saying, I think my partner has such and such, or I think I'm experiencing such and such. Not because they're correct, but because it demonstrates some interest and initiative. And I like to encourage that. I think that's great. I think that they're interested. It tells me in most cases that they are interested in understanding either this other person or themselves. They may have it completely incorrect because, right, that's a pretty nuanced process of diagnosis. And certainly as mental health has become more and more of a discussion, a public discussion in very helpful ways. I mean, we could endlessly watch YouTube videos or TikTok videos or Instagram videos in which people are like, and my so-and-so is so bipolar. And you're like, oh, you do not know what that word means.
Yeah,
I know you think you know what that word means.
Right.
That's not what that word means, right? And people tossing around, oh, he's such a narcissist. Oh, she has BPD. Oh, I mean, these diagnoses have become, sort of merged into the popular lexicon in a way that is not good, right? Exactly. Because they mean something very specific and very 1 out of a million. Is that appropriate for the way it's being used, right?
Right.
But I think the fact that people do want to know and that are interested in finding some, labels are a way of explaining something, right? And what that says to me is that this person is seeking an explanation for what's going on. They want to know, and they want to know so that they can have something go differently. They want to know how the clock works so that they can reprogram it, and you go, okay, that's great. That's a really great starting point. I'm really glad that you're interested in showing this sort of like initiative and saying like, gosh, maybe this is it, even if that thing is completely off base. And I'm happy to talk to you about that, right? And help you understand why it takes more than kind of a layperson screening of somebody's behavior to do a diagnosis, right? A behavioral diagnosis. But I love that you want to know.
Right.
If it's in the spirit of things being better and collaborative. That's great. That's not a problem. Right. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I feel like that is healthy. What I worry about, and this is just my hot take on this, is like people substituting going to a therapist or a trained professional because they're like, yeah, I did all my research. This person totally has NPD. And, I talked to ChatGPT about it. I'm like, whoa, slow your roll. Like, like that's not, we don't need to be doing that.
And it's probably a little bit of a self-licking ice cream cone because the people I see are going to a therapist. So they're not doing that. Right. Like so those folks I'm not seeing. And I agree with you that is a little insidious and
totally.
And has a dark side. It truly does. Because what happens is, I think for many people, when someone decides, let's take that example, you said NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, right?
Yes.
When you decide something about somebody else, right? You go like, look, I pulled up this checklist and you check all these boxes.
Right.
Ergo, I've decided it's not me deciding, it's this checklist. Right. I'm not the one doing it. This is empirical.
Right. Exactly.
You meet criteria for NPD according to me, right? There's an authority behind that.
Right.
And the authority obscures your bias as the person doing the thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So when you anger a toddler, they'll look at you and call you a big stupid, or a big meanie, or whatever your toddler's, vocabulary includes, right? But nobody takes a toddler seriously because #toddler, right? You don't go, oh my gosh, no,
I am a big
look
meanie
in the mirror and do some deep self-reflection about being a big stupid or a big meanie head, right? This is not how most of us respond to insults from toddlers. Right. Most of us. However, I think there's this credibility and authority with mental health diagnoses that toddlers do not have. And so when someone says like, well, I've done the research and this person has NPD, they're sort of invoking an authority and a knowledge about what that other person's doing, why they're doing it, and where they're coming from that isn't really probably warranted. That doesn't mean that, 1 out of 10 times that person might be correct.
Exactly. Sometimes, exactly. That does happen.
Could be.
Right.
Could be.
Could.
And there's, for a lot of people, something incredibly healing, especially NPD, because folks who have been in relationships with folks with narcissistic tendencies or let alone personality disorder have been very wounded and gaslit, right? And so being able to have a label and go, it's them, not me, is very, very helpful and healing and cathartic and therapeutic.
Right.
And
Agreed.
that's great. And in some other cases, right, perhaps we might take the example when somebody goes like, oh, that person's totally bipolar.
Yes. Yeah.
Nope, that is not a helpful, and even if you happen to be right, which chances are you are not, that diagnosis is one that requires a lot of very careful history through a very careful lens that excludes lots of other confounding variables. Right. It's not just someone who's moody or goes off in a heartbeat, right? Yeah. People confuse symptoms for certainty, right? So you and I could have the same cough, right? Exactly the same cough, but yours could be hay fever and mine could be tuberculosis, God forbid, right? It's the same cough, right? So if somebody's like, you have a cough, you all have asthma, neither of us have asthma, because the cough's the same, it's easy to say you have asthma, I have asthma, and we're going, no, actually don't. It could be a million things, right? A cough is associated with a million different things.
So true.
So all that to say, I think for what it's worth on a practical level, if you're a person who finds yourself inclined to try and sort of diagnose other people because you're looking for an explanation about their behavior patterns, you just need to be aware that that's a complicated process from qualified, trained people. And there's a reason for that. Again, not every cough is tuberculosis.
Right, exactly.
And if you need help with your own experience and validating what you've been through, it doesn't have to include labeling that other person in a way that you may not be quite qualified to do. There's help for you too. We don't have to make it about what that person is or isn't. We can validate your experience without making them an official fill in the blank.
Right.
That's not necessary.
So true. I love that. Validating your experience and giving you the space to talk through what you've been through. That's real.
100%,
you know, and
100%.
Taking it from there.
Yeah. If someone has caused you pain and suffering, right? We don't have to, I mean, it may be helpful to you. For some people, it's helpful to have some sort of explanation that, but ultimately we have to help you heal from that pain and suffering. Right. And putting a label on that person may or may not have anything to do with that. And again, if you're not quite qualified to do that, I'm not sure that that's really helpful. And also in some cases, when we're not talking about abusive relationships or narcissistic personality disorder or things like this, where people have been sort of gaslit into thinking they're the problem, often we need to probably have a good look at ourselves and how we co-create relationships with people, as opposed to being like, he's bipolar, she's bipolar. Well, maybe. And also what else goes on there? Yeah,
what else? Exactly. What's the end? Absolutely. I want to transition to our next section, our true or false section. So we're going to rapid fire a few of these that we found, and would love, whether they're true or false, or if there's some nuance, you could totally say that too.
Okay.
The first one, sadness is a negative emotion.
Am I supposed to say true or false to that?
Yeah, true or false. Or wait, hold up, nuance.
It's an emotion.
Yeah, true. Exactly. I love it. The next one. Bottling emotions can lead to physical symptoms.
Yes.
True. The brain prefers certainty, even if it's wrong.
Most of the time, most people.
Healthy relationships can help us process tough emotions.
100%.
You can be too self-aware for your own healing.
Whoa. No. You can perhaps be too intellectual about it.
Right. I've actually seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think self-awareness is like anything else. It can run amok.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a matter of being too self-aware. I think that's self-awareness run amok.
Right.
Which is different is different somehow than too self-aware.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I get the nuance there.
You can't have too much chocolate, but you can eat too much chocolate and have a tummy ache. You can never have too much chocolate. Cereal, you can never have too much cereal.
Yeah, never too much cereal. This next one, feeling sadness or anger fully can lead to healing. Feeling it fully.
Yes, although I don't think that's a one-to-one if-then. If you feel it fully, then you will be healed.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yep, absolutely. Healing from trauma is a lifelong process.
I think that's a really subjective. I think we could ask 10. I think it's not an overnight process.
Yeah,
it's not overnight.
You're allowed to caveat. You're allowed to say or shift it.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say, there's so many kinds of trauma,
right?
And the experiences that people have before they have traumatic experiences and the experiences they have after. There are so many influences in people's lives that impact how they experience trauma and how their relationship to that trauma during and after the fact, that I just would be hesitant to say anything generalizable about that process for another person.
I would ask you this one. Group therapy can help build trust and connection.
I think that's true. Mm-hmm. Can being the operative word.
Okay. This next one, healing from trauma also involves the body, not just the mind.
Yes. And also there are trauma therapies that are more somatic than others.
Right.
There are some that are quite cerebral, right? Are quite sort of neck up. Right. And also I think what kind of trauma someone is presenting with makes a tremendous amount of difference. There are definitely no hard and fasts on that.
Right.
But I would say in general, yes, because this is connected to this. It's all connected. Right. You can't really separate the two out.
Yeah. That book, The Body Keeps the Score, is
100%.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yes.
This last one, tough love approaches are effective for healing trauma.
I don't even know. I'm actually not sure what that would refer to.
I've seen, this comes from something we found online. So there was someone saying that getting in people's face, saying you need to get over it. And that people need that to heal trauma. And that's
I have never found that to be, I have never heard of that being a thing. That sounds damaging to me. That sounds like it would cause people much more difficulty.
That's what we thought, but
that sounds like a terrible idea.
We need to ask Lindsey about this.
Imagine in what context that would be helpful.
I've been seeing a lot in, these, male tough love, you gotta beat out the trauma. You've gotta these strange influencers. Sorry, I'm just gonna be honest. I find it to be strange. Who are telling men specifically that you need tough love and whatever you're, dealing with, just suck it up and blah, blah, there's very much this tone too. So
that's disturbing. I find that really, I don't even know how to respond to that. I was like, I don't know what we're talking about. Who's saying that? No, certainly what you're describing there that sounds anti-therapeutic.
Right.
And I think also we need to be really careful, and I'm sure the world that you're pointing to there, where this is coming from, is not careful about this.
Right.
About what we mean by trauma.
Yeah.
Right. So not everything that bothers someone is traumatic.
So true.
Right. So I suppose there's a world in which I'm going to use myself as an example because that seems safe. Right. Something can be bothering me, and maybe somebody does need to be like, Lindsey, come on, move on. Move on.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, enough.
Right.
I mean, sure. I think there are conditions under which that's happened to me, and thank you to those people for being like, let's go. Right. Which is hardly what you're describing either. You're saying it's pretty aggressive.
Yeah, really aggressive over things that are horrible,
Well,
like,
that's okay. So
yeah,
that's my next, that's my next
things
sort
that are
of,
really deep and saying like, you
yeah.
need to like suck it up and, are you a real man? I've actually heard this in videos
Wow.
and it's to me, it's quite trigger,
That
it's,
sounds intensely
yeah,
disturbing. Intensely disturbing
yes.
and traumatizing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And traumatizing, right?
Absolutely. And you just
There's
see them shudder. Like you see the people in the video just, oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, we could have a really long discussion about that little piece. And actually, I probably, I could refer you to so many other people to have this discussion with who would have many like remarkable things to say about that. There's a working therapist and scholar named Terry Real, Real, And Terry Real is really tremendous. And he's the developer of a therapy called RLT, which stands for Relational Life Therapy. And Terry Real's interest started out in men's issues. And he wrote a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It, The Legacy of Male Depression. And then he's written several books since then. But one of the things Terry Real talks about again and again and again in so many nuanced and incisive and remarkable ways is the disservice that this culture is doing men in particular.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're describing to me sounds absolutely toxic.
Yeah.
And I bring up Terry Real because one of Terry Real's big areas of focus is shame.
Yeah.
And the compounding effects of shame, right? Mm-hmm. And when you shame anyone for having human feelings or hard experiences, you are doubling down on the trauma, right? If anything exacerbates trauma experiences, it's shame about them, right? And that's often what is so traumatic to people about their traumatic experiences, the degree of shame they're already experiencing that thing happened, right? That they went through that. And so I'm sadly unsurprised to hear you tell me that there's a corner of the world that's suggesting that.
Right.
And that is not something that absolutely not.
Yeah, agree. I want to move to our rapid fire. I have just a few I want to ask you that are also a little bit controversial and then some about you. Curious, what is one wellness trend that you feel like needs to be called out? Just kind of on the note that we're going on with this tough love being therapy. What is one thing that you're like, this is just not the thing? Why are people suggesting it?
Oh, I love that. I'm also relieved that I don't have an instant answer. I'm really glad that I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Where I'm like, that's gonna go.
Yeah. That is.
I'm so relieved I don't know. Now, maybe this also means I don't follow enough trends. It could just be a sign that I live a little bit under a rock in this department.
Right. And that's good that if you don't have an answer, that's totally fine.
Yeah, okay, here's something I'll put out there.
Okay.
Maybe it's sort of ancillary. I wish that folks were a little less rigid in their ideas about journaling.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah.
I think it's occurred to me from things I've been told and seen and heard that there's sort of this mystique around journaling, that this is something that you should buy a really pretty leather-bound or unicorn encrusted or something fantastic that only comes from the bowels of Etsy and costs you $48. And then you buy this beautiful pen and only that pen shall write in that notebook, right? And you pull it out and you use your best handwriting and you say really deep things and they're so meaningful that your own mind is blown by this deep reflection and introspection. And I just feel like that's so much pressure.
I agree.
I can't write under those conditions.
I see. Right. If anyone actually looked at my journal, they'd be like, "Whoa, this is wild." Because I'm just like, but if that pressure, if it has to be beautiful and perfect and
for posterity,
prose, and
insightful and incisive. And I tell people, I'm like, look, how about this? How about you start writing things down on the back of receipts, cocktail napkins, junk mail, and then you staple all those pieces together in the corner.
Love it.
And once you collect 10, you throw them out. That's my journal. Like, it's
I love
10
it.
pieces of garbage that you have written the ravings of a mad woman on, right? And it is in like bullet point shorthand that only you would understand. And sometimes you don't even understand it. Because I think the point of journaling is to do the exercise in the moment. What you're getting out of it is the process, not a product.
Agree.
And the more we focus on pretty, spiral bound, unicorn encrusted things, then it's become a product. There's an outcome.
So true.
It's going to be a thing. And if you start scrolling away on the back of a cocktail napkin, when was the last time you went out of your way to like preserve a cocktail napkin? Never.
Exactly.
Right? Or the back of a receipt. So I'm a big believer in journaling as a much jankier process.
Me, same. I agree. I want my journal. I love you said ravings of a bad woman. Like, that's what I want my journal to be, the space to be where I'm like, man, if anyone found this, they would be like, I can just be so radically honest and
100%.
not feel like this is a Pinterest board, like
100%. Yes. Or how about, you can get those, they say they're for kids, but they make those crayons that you can write on the shower with.
Yes.
What if you just kept a stack of those, like with your shampoo, and you could just make a bullet list in the shower? Because that's where everybody thinks the things, right? In the shower.
I love that
and you just scribbled out in this kid's crayon.
Yes.
Yeah. That's journaling, people.
Yeah.
That's journaling.
I love that. That's a really good one. And I feel like journaling has become such an industry where it's, like everyone's journal needs to be like this Pinterest highlight reel or like profound 100%. Quotes. And I think that actually prevents people from doing the work and saying the things. If you can't be honest with yourself in your journal, then what is going on here?
Right. It is that mentality gets you focused on this product outcome, which is the antithesis of what journaling is, which is supposed to be in the moment, vomit, word vomit, thought vomit, feeling vomit. Right. And that's the point of it. After you've done that, you don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, some people think it, find it helpful to go back and whatever, and fine, power to you. But the pressure, I laughed, bullet journals.
Yes, I know. Yep.
I mean, bullet journals I thought were really interesting because that was sort of like the engineer's version of like the unicorn encrusted journal. Because it's still so pretty and neat and organized. And they say you don't have to like do it but you feel obligated to. Because look at all those pretty lines, and it's also very neat and organized. I mean, I don't see anybody drawing squiggly dragons in their bullet journal.
No. There's
it's just a different iteration of the same problem in my mind.
Pinterest and Reddit communities showing people showing how beautiful their bullet is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would be shamed out of that community because my stuff is like bootleg. So bootleg.
Or, who's to say that for me, and I mean this seriously, this is true. For me, a journal entry is something that I think of, and then I'm like, how am I going to remember this? How am I going to remember this? And I will email myself, and it's 2 run-on sentences of just the one thing. And I email it to myself because then somewhere it's in my email, which is a paper trail. Yay me. I can find it later, but I don't really want to find it. I just want to have gotten it out. And I didn't have a piece of paper at the time, and I didn't have a pen. Right. So that is the fastest way for me to sort of like paper airplane that business out into the universe. And that's what I need to do is paper airplane it. I don't need to get the paper airplane on the other end.
Agree. Totally agree. I love that you brought up journaling. That's a really good one. I want to ask one more thing. Biggest misconception about trauma. What is that in your mind?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what the biggest misconception about trauma is. I think one of them is this idea that if the person had done something differently or was handling it differently, then they wouldn't be traumatized. There's this sort of like individual level accountability on this person who's been traumatized that they had more control than they did over this experience, which of course is partly the root of trauma, is that it was out of this person's control in so many ways, or they had no choice, or they felt helpless, or they were helpless. But I don't know how. I guess there are 2 kinds of misconceptions: popular misconception, or like within the field, or for people who have trauma. And I don't specialize in trauma, so there are other people who would probably have some more timely, nuanced things to say about that.
Okay. Amazing. I want to ask you to just break down really quickly a few wild trends. Speaking of social media, we found some trends on TikTok specifically. Get ready for it. Get ready for it. This is one our team was debating about. We saw people hyping rapid release methods like scream therapy. Do you think that this is actually cathartic or chaotic?
No opinion.
Okay. Interesting.
No research. Research, right? There's nothing empirically validated about scream therapy, right? Scream therapy is from like the 70s, I think. That's like a 70s
and
phenomenon.
It's making a huge comeback. We're seeing people talk about it all the time. So
yeah, I mean, there's kind of an interesting question always floating in the ether, right? Which is all therapy therapeutic, and are all things that are therapeutic therapy? And of course the answer is no.
Right.
To both.
Right.
Right? So you can find things, I mean, there are very clearly delineated, empirically validated gold standards in therapy. Scream therapy is not one of them. Never has been. I'm fairly sure it never will be.
Right.
Having said that, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't get some kind of relief or release from it. I have no idea, right? I can't be the judge of that. Right. Walking in the woods is not therapy, but people of course say like, oh, nature is my therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess it kind of depends on what how are we defining therapy or therapeutics? You mean like empirically validated? No. Helpful to many people? Sure. And does it have to be, maybe the other thing that we're always trying to get our arms around here is, does something have to be therapy in order to be legit helpful? And of course the answer is no. Like going for a walk with your best buddy isn't therapy, but it's very therapeutic, right? Yeah. Petting a horse, there's equine therapy, but then there's just petting a horse or another animal. There's lots of animal interaction that's not animal therapy, and people find it very therapeutic. Right. So maybe we're kind of also talking about the difference between capital T and lowercase t, like therapy versus what do you find therapeutic? Right.
Interesting.
But I will stand behind scream therapy is not empirically validated.
That good to know, because the TikToks, the Instagrams will have you down these rabbit holes.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's not helpful to someone. Yeah. But I also have no idea what helpful means, right? Like, I don't know what that means either. Does it make them feel better for 5 seconds? Does it make them feel better for the next 10 years? I don't know.
What is it? Right. One last other trend that we keep seeing over and over and over, psychedelic therapy, specifically in trauma treatment. Is it promising or problematic?
Ooh, I think that depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Not my lane per se. Certainly the MAPS trials, which was the big, years long, very carefully controlled studies about psychedelics and trauma therapy, was the MAPS work was submitted for FDA approval. And my understanding is that it was sent back down and did not make it to the next phase of clinical trials, that they were sent back to the drawing board, so to speak. And I'm not up on the details of what that was exactly. If they just needed more time, more evidence, more subjects, more what, I'm not sure where the whole MAPS things stand. I think it's important to note that regardless of what's going on with that, there's a big difference between recreationally using substances, whatever substance that is, and being in a therapy environment with trained people.
Right.
And so, when people ask me about psychedelic therapy, my first question to them is like, well, A, what do you mean by that? Right? Because for some people, that means I met somebody who said they're a psychedelic guide, and they said I should go get myself some psilocybin and then come to their office, and they will sit with me and guide me while I something. And I don't know what any of that means. I don't know who this person is, but I know that that's not a therapeutic modality. I know that that is not evidence-based, and I don't know what it means for somebody to be a psychedelic assisted guide or coach. I just don't know what that means. Right. I know what it doesn't mean though, right? And there is certainly, it seems to me, an important distinction to be made, and maybe different people would make this distinction differently, but there's an important distinction to be made between getting a little high and doing some kind of rigorous therapeutic work. And usually it's licensed therapists who do rigorous therapeutic work, whether you're using some, ketamine clinics for depression are a big thing, right? Yeah. But those clinics are staffed by licensed, trained therapists. There's a protocol that they are following very, very carefully with high fidelity to the model. This is not have some ketamine and let's see what happens and see if you feel better, right? So my sort of thought for anybody who's thinking about that is ask yourself, is this person offering something truly professional, or is this person offering me the chance to get high and kind of like sit with me and see what happens while I'm doing that? Right. Because that is most certainly not an empirically validated approach to doing anything. I don't have any dog in the race on whether someone wants to do that for recreational purposes, right? That's a totally separate question. But don't confuse a recreational experience with a therapeutic experience, and don't confuse having that substance, whatever the substance is, because you have the substance, then it's intrinsically therapeutic. That's just getting high.
Yeah.
That's the difference between being in an environment where somebody has a protocol, right? And an empirically validated model versus not. Right. Just seeing what happens and being there. I mean, that's what people do when they're with their friends just getting high, right? It's like everybody sits around and they talk each other through whatever's happening-ish. So I really encourage people to be very, very careful about vetting the professionalism. And I don't mean that these other people are out to harm people or anything like that. I'm just saying there's a reason that there are licensed professionals in every discipline, right? Exactly. There's a reason that licensed engineers design and build bridges, not the rest of us who have a Lego set. Right. I have a Lego set. Right. That doesn't make me qualified. I know what a bridge looks like. I can draw one. Right. That hardly makes me qualified to suggest.
No one would want to drive on a bridge that I created.
I don't want to drive on a bridge I created, right? This is not the same thing. Yeah, totally. So please, to anybody who's considering, just be really careful and thoughtful about what it is you're trying to get out of the experience and who it is or what outfit it is, what their credentials are to help you get that outcome.
Right. Very important. Very important. I want to just jump down the Reddit rabbit hole for one question, because this was a question our team found and wanted to make sure that you answered. So this was in the subreddit advice. Okay. This person said, I just got out of prison after almost 4 years. How do I get my life back together? And they go on to say, I'm having trouble getting motivated to get out there and try to live a normal life. I've been a political activist since junior high, and I'm almost 27 now. I never thought I'd have a criminal record, or at least not so young. I don't even really know where to even start trying to piece my life back together. I'm very lost. And I just thought that, my heart, when our team found this, we're like, man, how so difficult. And, this person sharing and really looking to the community for advice. So having you on, we pulled this question and wanted you to answer it and provide some perspective to this.
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer a piece of it because this is not a therapeutic environment and that person has not signed up for therapy and had consent and all these things, right? Exactly. So I am not going to offer advice to that person on their specific situation, but I will dial into a very interesting thing that they mentioned about motivation and feeling like they didn't have the motivation to take some action steps, right? Is that what I heard?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what they said.
One of my favorite visuals in the whole world, and I'm really a picture is worth 1,000 words kind of a person. I really love, and I love one-frame cartoons. I love comics, this kind of thing. One of my favorites in the whole world, I don't know who, it's impossible to find out who put this together first, because it's been a meme as long as there have been memes. Side by side, 2 frames, right? 2 squares, little stick figure, same stick figure in each square, okay? And they're exact replicas. And in the first one, the stick figure is hanging from a bar with his hands. Okay. And then the second one's the exact same picture. Same stick figure is hanging from the same he's gripping with his bar and his little feet are a couple feet off the ground. Right. And the first caption says, pull up with motivation. And the second one says, pull up without motivation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, maybe we can find this online.
It's so good. It's so good. I've redrawn it for myself several times. Yeah. So good, right?
Right.
So profound.
Totally profound. Yeah.
So profound.
So clear too,
Yeah. So motivation is this ephemeral concept. It's the secret sauce that everybody thinks they wish they had more of, because if they did, then XYZ would get done, et cetera, et cetera. And they look at other people who are getting things done and go, oh, that person must have so much motivation. How can I get some of that? Can I siphon it off their tank? Where do I get the motivation from? I actually have a little, I make these practical, tactical videos on Instagram, and I have one about this, about buying motivation secret sauce. It's $1 million a teaspoon. Because everybody wants it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Really, you'll have to check it out. It's a cute video.
I have to too.
And, motivation is a really unreliable source of motivation.
Yeah.
Because motivation is a feeling, and it comes and goes like the breeze, as do all feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get something done, you're going to have to find something way more reliable than the feeling of motivation or any other feeling, because they're all unreliable. Right. And what comes to us from the ACT tradition, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, is the idea of accepting whatever your feelings are. Going, I feel unmotivated. I feel completely unmotivated. I have never had less motivation. And setting aside my feelings about it for a second, what are my values? Because values are 100% consistent and last forever.
Right.
The example I like to give people is all the parents in the world. And I don't care how much you wanted to be a parent and how much you love your kids. I do not believe that any person at 2 a.m. ever felt like getting up and changing their diaper.
No,
right?
Let's just keep it real.
Right. Especially in winter, in colder climes, and the wood floor is cold, right? And the house is cold, screamy, stinky, all the things, right? This is not a good time. Nobody feels like doing that.
No.
And yet people do it for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And then they do it again and again and again. They do this multiple times, right?
True.
This has nothing to do with, do you feel like changing a dirty diaper at 2 a.m. when the floor is cold? This has to do with your value about how you treat a baby, how you care for another human, right? Because whether you feel like it or don't feel like it, that value is 100% consistent. That value is consistent. You care about that when the floor is cold and when the floor is warm. When it's 2 a.m., when it's 5 p.m. Your value stays the same, right? And so one of the most helpful things we can do for ourselves is stop fighting our feelings and being like, how do I feel motivated so that I can do this thing, whatever the thing is, and go like, forget feelings. What's my value here?
Right.
What's my value? Oh, my value is I got my life back.
Yeah.
True. Let's go.
Right.
Right. And the nice thing about this perspective is that like, there's no demerits for acknowledging that you don't feel like it. I mean, just like, see the baby, when you go change a baby's dirty diaper at 2 a.m., the baby doesn't know or care that you don't feel like it. You can complain and moan under your breath. You can complain and moan above your breath the whole time. It will make no difference, this little baby, as long as you change its diaper. Right? So it's how you act, which is why ACT is called ACT.
Yeah.
It's how you act. Acting on your values. Right. And you can, sometimes, frequently, I don't feel motivated to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And what gives me great delight. Yeah, right? Like, no matter how much you like it, you'd still rather be doing something else, right? Like, and it gives me great delight in this sort of like sassy, self-indulgent way to march myself into the gym, muttering under my breath about how cross I am. Just like owning it. I'm not going to pretend. I'm just going to be like, what else I can be doing with my time? Instead, I'm here. Those surfaces are freaking filthy. I don't have there not a bleach wipes in the world. They're all my favorite protein shake. I'm going to moan about it and bitch about it the whole time. The whole time. But you know what? I'm doing it. So
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't have to, again, go back to the pull-up. It looks, the action is exactly the same, with or without the feeling, whatever the feeling in question is, including motivation.
Right. I love that.
So I think when we talk about not feeling motivated for any one of a number of completely legit reasons, we get to go, yep, that's real. That's super real. And what's the value that you can tap into that sort of not just supersedes, but underpins, is really the bedrock values are the bedrock and feelings are like the loose dirt blowing around on the surface. And dust devil and like poof over here and like, a spray over here. Values are the bedrock. We need to tap into the values. And what happens is when we're not clear about our values, then we're pushed around by our feelings.
Yes. So powerful. So powerful. Because there's a lot of people who are motivation, I feel like, coaches and junkies, and like, yeah, you got to get the motivation. And I agree. That's never, personally, it just never works for me. Like and
maybe there's like a nomenclature sort of issue here. Maybe we could say like, oh, you got to tap into your values as the motivation. As a motivation. Instead of looking for a feeling of motivation. Right. Right. Maybe it's potato.
Agree.
But motivation itself is usually like people are referring to the feeling of motivation. Yes, like exactly. I need to feel like I want to in order to. And you're like, no, you don't.
No,
not true.
Yeah. No.
Like, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 100% of Americans don't feel like paying taxes.
Yeah, ever. Exactly. Let's just keep it. That's why HR and H&R Block like rebranded it as refund day or whatever, because
100%. Yeah. Nobody feels like doing any of this stuff. Exactly. But people do it. Because they tap into something other than their feeling in the moment, right? And now whether you're tapping into like, God, getting audited sounds worse. Yeah. That's fine. Okay. Totally. Or maybe you're a good person and you tap into some deep value like, I believe in paying for roads and I want to contribute. God bless you. I love that. Yeah. I want to say the same. Whatever gets you through the night, so to speak, right? But you got to tap into something deeper than these feelings that just are blowing around on the surface and likely to change at any given moment. And we can prove that because if we said to any person who, let's go back to the gym example because it's so good and concrete. Like if you took you on your most unmotivated day, okay? You're like,
there's a lot.
Okay. The most unmotivated day, right? Like imagine that for a second. Right. I could motivate you in 2 seconds. I walk through your door and be like, I'm going to pay you $1 million to go to the gym. You'd be like, let's go. Where are my sneakers?
We are like, no sneakers. We're going.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's how fickle motivation is, so right? True. That's how fickle feelings are. Yeah. Think about how in 1 minute we're like, I would never go to that person's something. And then somebody's like, did you know that she's going through blah, blah, blah? And you're like, oh my gosh. How big a gift should we get? How can I chip in? Shall I get the balloons? Can I bring cake? What can I do? Right? You just like boing. I mean, feelings are so fickle.
So fickle. Oh my goodness. So true.
We don't want to be making decisions based on something that is so erratic.
No, so erratic. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. I think if I just, my life was just based on my feelings, we would just be in pajamas, eating ice cream and drinking wine. That would be my day.
I mean, so would most people.
And cereal. Wine.
Cereal, wine floats. Yeah,
exactly. I know we're just at time. If you have a minute, we'd love to do what's in the bag if you have something you'd like to show us.
Sure. Yeah. Do you explain this or do we just go?
Just go. So anyway, everyone who's watched the podcast, What's in the Bag is our segment where, Lindsey will show some things that are important to her or she uses in her practice. So, so Lindsey, what's in your bag?
Okay. I'm going to show you. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm like, dun, dun, dun.
Here it is.
Oh, are those beads?
Yes.
Oh, how cool. That's a new one.
So in my bag is a jar of beads.
Okay.
Unpack. And explain. You can think of this jar of beads a lot like a head full of thoughts. Thoughts are really interesting, just like beads, because these beads are all different, right? They're all made out of different things. We have some in here that are clay, some that are plastic, some that are wood. They're all different textures, colors, sizes, shapes. There's some letters and numbers and big ones, small ones, ones that look like olives, ones that I judge as likable, ones that I judge as horrific and atrocious, right? Everything in between. The thing is no matter how different they are, they're all what? They're all beads. They're all beads. And what happens for a lot of us is that we will get hyper-focused on one thought. Right. This is a bead I don't happen to like. I don't like these clay jobs. I think they're weird. It's just not my jam. I don't know. It's not my, I really dislike this one. This one's terrible. I don't like the colors. It just doesn't work for me.
It's got a swirly vibe to it.
Yeah.
I love that yellow round one, by the way. Just
you like the yellow round one? I'll send it to you. You can have, I'll ship it to you. Swag from the experience. And what happens with these is when we get hyper-focused on one, we forget that it's one of many.
Yes.
Right? And the interesting thing about anything you hyper-focus on is when you hyper-focus on it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it blots out everything. And then we really struggle to remember that it's one of many because now it's the only thing.
Right.
And so part of what we can do for ourselves when we get sort of preoccupied with a thought is try and put it back in context of all the other thoughts and sort of remind ourselves. And I keep this jar on my desk for myself as much as for anybody else or anything else, to remind myself that while some of these beads I like and some of them I don't like, and some of my judge is good, bad, helpful, unhelpful, all the things that we think about thoughts, right? I hate that thought makes me a good person, that thought makes me a bad person. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed I had that thought, right? They're all just thoughts.
Yeah.
And the more we hyper-focus on one and how much we dislike it, the more it will blot out the sun and convince us that it's the only thought. Even though nothing's changed, it's still one of a couple hundred that I've got going on in this jar at any given time, right? The other thing that I love about this is it's a really good reminder that, sometimes we get upset because we go, well, the thought keeps coming up. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Okay. I mean, as many times as you can turn this over, eventually you're going to see the same thought. You're going to see it. In fact, that thought may be in there multiple times. I don't know. There may be 10 of them. It's still just one of many. And if we can put those thoughts back in context as one of many instead of the one, the thing, it really de-escalates the things we're sort of hyper-focused on. And I love that.
I love that. What a magnificent, beautiful way to think about it, and to, as you said, like reframe. I think sometimes you get stuck in that loop. You're looking down, that straw sometimes, not even the paper towel, and you're just in straw mode, and to think about, the jar of beads and say, there's more, there's other things I can hang on and think about and shift to, versus just focusing on the one little ugly bead that you don't like. And it's hard to do. It's a skill, as you said before. These are skills. And I think sometimes people berate themselves and like, I'm just stuck here, but knowing that it's an actual skill.
Yes.
Using the beads as a framework to, okay, I can shake it up, I can move it, and like, how do I build that skill? That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love it.
And how do I maybe pick out a couple more beads and put them in my palm with that bead to help myself remember that it's still a bead, no matter how ugly it is, no matter how much I dislike it. Maybe it has a funny smell. I don't know. It's still just one of many beads, and they're all beads.
So profound. I love it. I will take that for the rest of my life. I'll always remember that. And
I'm so glad.
Beads.
Well, it's encapsulated in an Instagram video on my Instagram somewhere in there. Yes, the bead demo.
I love this. I love this. I love it. I love it. And hopefully more people start to have, beads in a jar and there just to remind them, and sometimes you need that physical. I believe photos are everything, as you said. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and visuals as well, and having that representation
truly
is so profound, so beautiful.
I love it.
Oh, Lindsey,
I'm glad.
Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Such a joy. By the way, where can we find you online, on social? Where's the best place that people can get in contact with you?
Sure. I have a website at Onward Psych Services. It's PSYCH services.com. I'm on Instagram at Onward Psych Services. I do practical, tactical videos about once a week, just little snippets of fun things that seem to be helpful to folks, seem to resonate. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a phone number. My phone number's on my website. Those where people think make calls.
Phone number. Like so many people. So many people don't these days. It's crazy.
I know.
Awesome.
There's a phone number. There's a contact us form on the web. I'm available in a number of ways, but probably Instagram and my website are probably
perfect. We'll link up to all of that. Thank you, Lindsey. Such a pleasure to talk to you forever. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Such a joy. Thank you.